So next I'm going to hand over to Tom Campbell from Arbuthnott Community Development Group. I'm going to share Tom's slides and he's going to give a case study giving the community's perspective of working with an architect and carrying out a project.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I'm one of the team working to acquire the Church of St Ternan in Arbuthnott, which is located in South Aberdeenshire, to secure its future as a heritage asset. I'll try and make my spiel brisk to allow time for questions at the end. Sarah's kindly handling the slides because I'm an IT dinosaur. I'm not going to talk precisely to each slide, but they're a lot nicer for you to watch rather than me bumping my gums. So a warm virtual welcome to the ancient and beautiful Church of St Ternan, Arbuthnott. Today it's my privilege to share some insight into our development plans for this important heritage property to serve the current and future needs of its community and be a memorable visitor experience. And after listening to Jo's insightful talk, much of what I'm going to say mirrors her remarks. Trying to sum up the situation that we find ourselves in at Arbuthnott, I would say we're on a journey of adaptation in the midst of transition. And undoubtedly, having the right architect on board is key to any group's ability to successfully tackle the many challenges which inevitably arise when dealing with projects involving heritage properties. That certainly has been our experience at Arbuthnott. I think much of what I'll say will resonate with those of you working on heritage projects. Whatever stage you may have reached, my hope is that you can all take away points which will be useful in your own endeavours. Let's fill in a little background information relating to our pre-Reformation Category A listed church in Arbuthnott. In recent years, the historic parishes of Arbuthnott, Bervie and Kinneff have been under the care of one Church of Scotland minister based in Inverbervie. Services of worship are currently held each Sunday in Arbuthnott and Bervie churches. And parts of Arbuthnott Church date back to the 13th century. The south side aisle belongs to the titled Arbuthnott family, whose predecessors are buried there, and you can see the effigy in the back of that slide. The surrounding graveyard, and you see some of the stones outside the Arbuthnott aisle. It's owned and maintained by Aberdeenshire Council. Electric power has been available in the church for several years, but there was no supply of running water until 5 years ago, when an extension was added on the north side of the nave. This extension houses a small kitchen and an accessible toilet. A septic tank and soakaway to deal with effluent had to be installed in ground on the opposite side of the public access road from the church. This ground is part of a larger area belonging to Aberdeenshire Council, who have been simultaneously developing it as a cemetery because the existing church graveyard has reached its full capacity. Hence, a land transfer had to be negotiated. The project to build the kitchen and toilet extension was championed by the local minister, Linda Broadley, in 2017. Here's Linda performing the official opening in 2021, accompanied by her successor, Andrew Morrison. I didn't dare ask which of them washed the dishes and which of them spent a penny. The church property convener at that time engaged a long-established local architect to design and oversee construction of the extension and associated groundworks. Through active fundraising and a range of events like organ recitals by our accomplished organist Kyle McCallum, plus the generous services of a local builder, the team successfully completed the addition of a very useful facility which blends well with the existing church building. Within a relatively short space of time, the minister moved elsewhere The property convener sadly passed away and the architect retired. That was the situation which I inherited as the incoming property convener to close out the legal compliance and final payment issues for the project. An added challenge was that we were by then in the midst of COVID restrictions, which hampered our ability to make progress. Before we move on from building the church extension, and I'll leave you to decide if that's a shaft of heavenly light coming down, I'd like to touch on a couple of the more unusual aspects which the architect had to deal with on our behalf, on top of obtaining the usual planning consent and approval from Historic Environment Scotland, the latter due to the property's Category A listed status. Because the foundations and pipe tracks were being excavated within the ancient graveyard, an archaeological consultant had to be retained in case human remains or artifacts were encountered. A few human bones were indeed dug up. Police Scotland had to be notified in case they were of recent origin, but fortunately the archaeologist was able to confirm that they were indeed ancient. An environmental specialist had to be brought in to determine a suitable site for the septic tank and soakaway, which would be acceptable to the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency. To reach the chosen location, the effluent pipe had to cross under the public road. One of my first actions on becoming involved with responsibility for Arbuthnott Church after the unexpectedly sudden demise of the extension project team was to engage an architect. In this regard, we've been fortunate to obtain the services of Kerry Smith, whose practice KSA Chartered Architects, based in Montrose, is conveniently located for us. Kerry has developed her knowledge and keen interest in heritage-related architectural projects. She has become a vital contributor to our team's efforts as we develop a master plan for the future of Arbuthnott Church, and is our go-to person for a wide range of advice and support services. By the way, this slide shows the lovely stained glass windows, faith, hope, and charity in the chancel. Past experiences of working with other architects on other properties have taught me the importance of establishing a good working relationship up front between the architect and client. It's so beneficial throughout the project to clearly understand one another's needs and enjoy open and timely communications. Whenever a requirement for architectural services arises, we meet with Kerry, usually on site, to agree a brief. She then prepares a proposal complete with schedule and estimated fee based on the standard Scottish conditions for appointment of an architect. On our acceptance of a proposal from Kerry, her practice proceeds to carry out the agreed work scope. If either party becomes aware of any change in requirements while the work is underway, they flag it up so that a scope variation can be prepared, evaluated, and either agreed or the work can be put on hold or terminated. This procedure works well for client and architect as it allows both to maintain good control of the project schedule, the budget, and allocation of resources. None of the foregoing is rocket science, nor is it particularly exciting, but having an agreed plan from the outset and ensuring that all parties carefully adhere to it is crucial for successfully completing any project. Moreover, it helps to make the experience enjoyable for all participants. Since bringing KSA Chartered Architects on board, the practice has prepared digital record drawings of the church building complete with the recent extension. They have also produced a number of layout plans for the ground containing the septic tank and soakaway, which are required in connection with concluding the land transfer from Aberdeenshire Council and updating the title deed for the property. This has been an extremely laborious and time-consuming process requiring interfacing with several council departments and legal representatives. It is only now nearing settlement. This slide shows the interesting history of construction of the church over 8 centuries. Towards the end of 2022, the Church of Scotland announced its intention to dispose of Arbuthnott Church as part of a major rationalisation of its property portfolio throughout Scotland. In response to that news, a working group named Arbuthnott Community Development Group was set up last year to investigate acquiring the Arbuthnott Church and operating it as a community asset and visitor destination. First port of call for the volunteer members of ACDG seeking guidance to take our project forward was the Historic Trust Network. Sarah Pearce and her colleagues certainly haven't let us down, so I'd like to express our thanks to them. Introductions to the collaborative network of organisations such as Historic Churches Scotland and the friendly, helpful people working in them have been a great benefit for us. We've found the following features particularly useful. This series of webinars, A Future for Your Church, with so many inspiring case studies being presented. The draft guidance document, Your Church, Your Community, containing the excellent 12-step project flowchart and many useful references to resource tools and organisations. For Arbuthnott Church, we've reached the stage of assessing the project's viability. 2 key professionals are engaged with our group in this exercise. Our architect, Kerry Smith, who is surveying the property and reporting on its condition, working with a quantity surveyor to develop cost estimates for repairs and maintenance based on the as-found condition and adaptations to suit its intended future use. Our project advisor, Anne Payton of Indigo Project Solutions. Anne is appraising development options, engaging with stakeholders to determine needs and future usage, and appraising financial sustainability. Later this year, assuming the project is shown to be viable, our working group, shown here celebrating our first birthday, intends to transform into a Scottish Charitable Incorporated Organisation, SIO, suitably constituted for negotiating with the General Trustees of the Church of Scotland to acquire the property and raise funds for its acquisition, adaptation and initial operation. The end of 2025 is the target date for transfer of ownership. I hope this overview of the journey we're on with the Church of St Ternan Arbuthnott demonstrates the importance of working harmoniously with an architect on any heritage project involving the built environment. Our experience so far is good, and we hope yours is too. Now I'll hand you back to Sarah for the question and answer session.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tom. It's so helpful to have a case study and to hear it directly from a community who've been working through this process. And having visited the extension that you put in a few years ago now, it's so useful and it's so helpful, and it's just lovely to see that actually such a small little addition just gives you essential services that mean that you can use the building in so many different ways. And I'm sure we'll come on to that in the Q&A session. But thank you very much for that, and thank you to everyone who's been putting their questions into the box. So we've now got a good 25 minutes to chat through any questions that we have, and there's been plenty being put into the chat box. So I'm going to work through those, and I know we've got Victoria and I always have questions to ask as well. First of all, Tom, I'm just going to come back to you and just ask, how did your group go about selecting the right architect for the job?
Right, we take a step back. We already had a working relationship with Kerry Smith at Bervie Church. Prior to that, we looked into her practice's relevant experience dealing with heritage properties, and we gathered opinions from other clients. Spoke to a retired architect who knew what different people were doing. So we got to know her practice setup, and we felt comfortable that we could work together with her. The size of KSA Chartered Architects, and the fact that they're immersed in the local culture appealed to us. So our selection process comprised a combination of fact-checking and emotional assessment. I would add that every project has its unique set of requirements, so take time to understand what yours are. For example, does the project require the services of a large multidiscipline practice, or will you be better served by a local architect who's embedded in the history and culture of your area and organisation? And also try very hard not to make cheapness a governing criterion. It's almost inevitable that external funding will have to be obtained to finance any project, so it's better to put additional effort into that activity than put up with a less than satisfactory service provision.
Thank you, Tom. Victoria, have you got anything to add? Any experiences from selecting the right architect for your projects?
Both Kerry and Tom mentioned this very clearly. It can be just about how you gel with the person. I think it's quite an instinctive thing, but it's very difficult to measure. But I think spending time with somebody, talking to them, are they a good listener? Do they get what you're trying to explain to them? And Joe, beg your pardon, Joe. Joe warned against this. That some architects can have their own agenda. Are they wanting to bring their experience to help you achieve your aims? Beware of anyone who wants to imprint their objective on what you're doing, but it's about that personal relationship. But yeah, both Joe and Tom, I think were spot on there in explaining that one.